Let me ask you something. How many dreams have died in the waiting room? How many goals were never reached? Not because you weren't capable, not because you didn't have the talent, but because you waited. You waited for the right time, the perfect moment, the ideal opportunity. And while you were waiting, life kept moving, doors closed, and the fire that once burned inside of you started to dim. Waiting can be a silent killer of potential. It disguises itself as wisdom, patience, or preparation. But too often, it's just fear wearing a mask. You say you're waiting till you feel ready, but what if I told you that ready is a lie? Because growth doesn't happen in comfort. You don't rise by standing still. You rise by doing. Look, the harsh truth is this. Waiting creates a gap between who you are and who you could be. Every moment you delay, you're training your mind to settle for less. The more you wait, the more resistance you build. And over time, that delay becomes your habit until you spend years watching your own life pass you by. Your breakthrough is on the other side of movement. Action is the difference between a dreamer and a doer. Do you want to look back 5 years from now and say, I'm glad I started? Or I wish I had? Because time isn't going to wait for you. The question is, are you going to wait for it? Stop hesitating. Stop rehearsing. Stop doubting. Start doing. We've all heard it before. I'm just getting ready. I'm still planning. Or it's not the right time yet. Those phrases sound responsible, mature even. They make us feel like we're doing something when in reality, we're doing nothing at all. Let's call it what it really is. Most of the time, waiting isn't about preparation. It's about fear. It's the fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of not being good enough, and fear of stepping to the unknown. And instead of admitting that we're afraid, we cover it up with a more socially acceptable excuse. We say we're getting ready, but how much preparation is too much? When do you cross the line from being prepared to being paralyzed? There comes a point where all the research, all the note-taking, all the strategizing becomes nothing more than a clever way of avoiding action. You tell yourself you're building, but really you hide. Because as long as you're preparing, you don't have to face the possibility of falling short. As long as you're not quite ready, you don't have to confront the pressure of real effort, real opposition, and real results. You see, preparation feels safe. It feels smart. It feels like progress. But here's the truth. Preparation without execution is just procrastination dressed up in a business suit. It gives you the illusion of forward motion, but you're still in the same place. You're standing on the edge of a cliff, wearing all the right gear, looking the part, but you still haven't taken the leap. And what's holding you back isn't the wind or the weather, it's you. Fear whispers in your ear telling you that you're not ready, that you need just a little more time, a little more knowledge, a little more confidence. And you believe it because fear doesn't show up screaming. It shows up sounding reasonable. That's the trap. You think you're being cautious, but you're really building a prison out of it. You tell yourself you'll act when you feel more certain, when you have more clarity. But clarity doesn't come from thinking. It comes from doing. Confidence doesn't grow in silence. It grows in struggle. You want to be excellent at something? Start. You want to learn what works and what doesn't? Move. You want to feel confident in your ability? Step into the fire. There's no amount of reading, researching, or waiting that can prepare you for the reality of real work. The only way to become is to begin. Some of the most successful people in the world didn't wait until they were ready. They started with what they had, where they were, with whatever tools were available. They stumbled. They messed up. They learned the hard way. But they moved. And because they moved, they grew. And because they grew, they succeeded. They didn't wait for perfection. They chose progress. They didn't need a perfect plan. They needed a starting point. Waiting for perfection is the enemy of execution. If you're constantly waiting for the stars to align, you'll spend your life looking up instead of moving forward. There will always be a reason to hesitate, a voice in your head that says not yet. But that voice isn't your guide. It's your resistance. And the longer you listen to it, the stronger it gets. It starts to sound like logic. It starts to sound like wisdom. But all it's doing is keeping you in place. Let's be real. Life doesn't give you guarantees. You're never going to feel 100% ready. There's no perfect time to launch your idea, to apply for that opportunity, to start the journey. You become ready by showing up. You become wise by making mistakes. You become strong by failing and getting back up. Waiting will never make you fearless. It will only make you frustrated, because deep down you know you were built for more. And that gap between your potential and your reality, it starts to eat at you. There's something dangerous about delay. It starts off small, harmless even. You tell yourself you'll start tomorrow. You'll get to it next week. You'll chase that goal when you're less busy, less tired, more ready. And in the moment, it doesn't feel like a big deal. Just a pause, just a break. But what you don't realize is that every time you delay action, you're training your mind to tolerate hesitation. You're reinforcing a habit of postponement. And with every pause, every skipped opportunity, you lose a little more momentum. You lose a little more of your edge. Action is energy. Action is movement. When you act, you create motion, and motion creates rhythm. It builds confidence, it builds clarity, and it builds strength. But when you stall, when you delay, you do the opposite. You let that fire cool. You let that rhythm break, and the longer you wait, the harder it becomes to start again. What once was a spark becomes a shadow. What once was a calling becomes a burden. That idea that once lit you up, it starts to feel distant. You used to feel inspired. Now you just feel stuck. That's the power of resistance. It doesn't crash through the door. It creeps in quietly. It builds with every day you don't act. It multiplies with every excuse you accept. At first it's just a whisper. You could start later. Then it becomes a pattern. I'll do it tomorrow. Before long it becomes your default setting. Resistance becomes a wall between who you are and who you're supposed to be. Momentum doesn't survive in that kind of environment. You might think your goal is still there, waiting patiently, but the truth is, momentum fades fast. When you stop moving, everything stops with you. Your focus, your drive, your urgency. And the next time you try to pick it back up, it feels heavier, more distant. You look at that goal and it doesn't excite you the way it used to. It intimidates you. It feels harder than before, not because the goal has changed, but because you changed. You've let time convince you it wasn't worth it, that maybe you're not ready, that maybe it's not for you after all. That's what delay does. It builds friction. Every missed day adds weight. Every excuse stacks on top of the last. And soon, what was once a small task becomes a mountain. Not because it's grown, but because you shrunk in your belief. Action is what stretches your confidence. Every time you act, you send a message to yourself, I'm capable, I'm in control, I'm moving forward. But every time you don't, you send the opposite message. I'm afraid. I'm serving, I'm not ready. Yes. You don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to know every step, but you do need to move. Because motion feeds motivation, not the other way around. Too many people sit and wait for motivation to show up before they take the first step. But motivation doesn't appear out of thin air. It's built, it's earned through movement. And the more you move, the more power you generate. It's like a snowball rolling down a hill. One small push is all it takes. But without that push, nothing happens. It just sits there, full of potential, but never becoming anything more. That's what's at stake when you delay. Potential wasted. Dreams pause so long they start to fade. Not because they weren't real, but because they weren't acted on. You've got to understand, momentum is a fragile thing. It doesn't wait for you. It doesn't sit idle while you figure it out. It rewards those who keep going, even when it's messy, even when it's unclear, even when it's uncomfortable. Don't let delay become your default. Don't let resistance take root. The longer you wait, the more excuses you give yourself permission to believe. The more you hesitate, the further away your goal drifts. Not physically, but mentally. Because the real distance isn't measured in miles or time. It's measured in belief. It's measured in discipline. It's measured in the space between where you are and the action you refuse to take. So don't wait, don't overthink. Don't let one day turn into 1 week, then 1 month, then 1 year. Take the steps, send the email, make the call, write the page, start the process, even if it's small, especially if it's small, because one action leads to the next. One move forward builds the strength for the next. That's how you rebuild momentum. That's how you silence resistance. That's how you win, not by waiting, but by doing. There's a dangerous belief that traps more people than failure ever could. The belief that everything must be perfect before they start. It sounds reasonable at first. You want your plans to be polished. You want your timing to be right. You want to eliminate every flaw before you make a move. But the truth is, chasing perfection is just another way of staying still. It gives you something to aim for that you'll never reach, so you can keep telling yourself the story that you're working on it while never really moving forward. Perfection is a moving target. The more you chase it, the further it pulls away. There is always one more thing to fix, one more piece to figure out, one more moment to wait for. But while you're standing still, life keeps going. Opportunities come and go. Time slips through your fingers. The world doesn't wait for you to feel ready. And in that stillness, the dream starts to fade, not because it wasn't real, but because it wasn't pursued. Progress is not about perfection. It's about motion. It's about choosing to move even when the path isn't clear, even when the plan isn't perfect, because action brings clarity. Doing teaches you more in 1 hour than thinking will teach you in a week. You learn by engaging, you grow by trying. The path doesn't reveal itself to the one who waits, it reveals itself to the one who walks. You don't need to have it all figured out. You don't need the perfect words or the perfect tools or the perfect conditions. You need to show up. You need to act. You need to take the first step, and then the next, and then another. That's how progress is built. Not in leaps of brilliance, but in steady, imperfect strides. Every expert was once a beginner. Every master once fumbled through their first steps. The difference is they didn't wait until they were flawless. They moved while they were still figuring it out.